You want to sit? Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here at Intersections. I feel like I have my back to somebody always. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and we sponsor the Intersections luncheon each month, basically during the school year. And so this is the last of Intersections for this session. And so we are delighted to have you here, whether you are in the room or whether you are online. Our planning team is going to begin planning immediately after this session for the next coming year. So stay tuned for the ideas that are going to come out of that and what we're going to focus on next year as well. So it's always exciting when the team gets together, and that's really not only Interfaith Alliance of Iowa staff, but folks who attend Intersections on a regular basis. So we're always happy for that team and thankful for their work as well. So today we are going to talk about the great topic of the Iowa legislature. um, but we have two really good friends who are going to help us navigate that conversation. I almost said Representative Art Staed. I've said that for so many years, so sorry about that. Yeah, you're still representing. Senator Art Staed, who represents part of Cedar Rapids, as you know, and Representative Aime Wichtendahl, who represents Hiawatha and other parts and part of Cedar Rapids and a whole bunch of different things. And so they're going to each talk a little bit about what is important to them and what's been happening at the legislature. The legislature has not gavelled out for the year. We don't know when that's going to happen. And there's still a lot of room for some even more difficult things to be passed. So I'm going to start with Representative Aime Wichtendahl, and she's going to talk a little bit, and then Senator Staed is going to speak, and then we'll get to your questions and answers. And for those who are online, you are welcome to put your questions in the chat. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's a wonder to see all of you here today. I'm happy to see all of you. For those of you who don't know me, yes, I'm State Representative Aime Wichtendahl. I represent District 80. Art was my predecessor in that district. And so that includes Northeast Cedar Rapids, Hiawatha, and Robbins. So the legislature, people ask me a lot, like, what's it like to be in the legislature? And I always tell them it's very bipolar because there are days, and we'll get to some of the bills that we fight on here in a minute, but like there are days where just you have the bill, we'll start as the Medicaid work requirements bill as an example where we just go out there and fight to the mat against the Republicans with just everything we've got. And that's just like with anger, you can feel the anger and the tension on this one topic about to boil over. And then the next day you'll come in and be like, well, I loved working on this bill with you here today. This was a great bill. It's always a good chance whenever we can do anything, positive either for veterans or put money back into Iowa's pockets, that sort of thing. So just kind of talking a little bit, kind of what's good, what's been bad that's been done in the legislature. I kind of break it down in top three. So, in terms of top three for me this session, and one of the bills that I'm most proud of is the firefighters cancer expansion definition. This was a bill that passed unanimously in 3 prior sessions. This was a priority for me coming back into the legislature, having been on city council and being very well aware of what our firefighters endure and go out and are exposed to on a daily basis, to make sure that we could expand the definition of cancer so that they could receive treatment and ensure that there's a funding mechanism for that. So that was one of the first bills that I brought back this session, the contents of which it was basically cut, copy, and paste of what had passed the House last session. Ultimately, it did pass the House again unanimously. Went over to the Senate. It did change a little bit back and forth between the Senate and the House a couple of times, but the good news is that bill is finally going to Governor Reynolds' desk after 4 years. So that was a very proud moment to see and to be able to go ahead and to get across the finish line. What other else? I'm trying to think here. Another good bill was probably the thickest bill that we had passed here, and I'll apologize. always forget which numbers are because they change also between the House and the Senate. I think it was something like House File 988. But basically, it was a disaster recovery bill to what it, and essentially it provided more money for disaster recovery. It provided, money to be able to tear down and demolish buildings in the event that we have tornadoes, floods, derechos. There's money for that. But the most important aspect of that bill is that it does prevent like contractors, insurance adjusters from coming in the immediate aftermath of a disaster to basically it cuts down on things like fraud for where you would have like adjusters or contractors just show up, people like, I could fix that roof, and then they would go in, do a little work, and then just completely disappear. And then because they'd started that work and they had that claim to your insurance settlement, then people were being scammed pretty regularly in the aftermath of disasters. The last thing that any Iowan needs in the event of a derecho, God forbid we ever have another one of those here, or a flood, is just to have their home be damaged and then have someone scammy coming in from out of state making a claim on that money and doing no work to rehabilitate their home. So that bill will go a long way to addressing that. Let me see, what else have we done? I know this is a little bit of one. I'm always looking forward to. I think here, like I said, I know in the last couple of weeks we did some sales tax savings on basic everyday items. That's in the one that I'm happy to have worked on in terms of eliminating sales tax on toilet paper, laundry detergent, and vitamins. That was another big one that we did here. That bill, all of those are still sitting in the Senate, so we'll see if they'll act on that. Well, and now going to the bad bills, of which there have been unfortunately far too many. The yeah, obviously the bill to remove the gender identity from the Iowa Civil Rights Act, I think was probably, quite frankly, the worst bill to come out of the Iowa legislature in any kind of given time. There's absolutely no need for it. It kind of reinforces the Iowa Republicans' hyper obsession with trans people and trans issues in general, and the fact that you're willing to take civil rights from a group of people that have, been a part of our state, and basically saying that no, it's legal for you to discriminate against trans people in employment and education and credit and housing, and just to be, I don't know. It says on our flag, our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain, and they don't care. They had the votes to do it, and it's probably one of the most disgraceful things that has happened in our state. It does nothing to solve any real Iowa problems, and it will further push our people out of the state who no longer feel safe residing in the state of Iowa. I briefly alluded to the Medicaid work requirement bill. That is, again, another bill that solves no real problems. It's just designed to kick people off of their health care by instituting work requirements. Most Medicaid recipients already do work or are working. There are some that it is not possible to go ahead and maintain steady work just based on whatever condition that they have. Certainly, I've had a few constituents reach out that they're very really concerned, just given their situation in life, that if this passes, they won't have access to their medicine, they won't be able to maintain a steady job, and then on top of that, they won't have access to health care. I think it's important to note that when Arkansas did this, it kicked 18,000 people off of the health insurance rolls. It didn't improve workforce participation, and it didn't save the state any money. The point of the bill is just to be pointlessly cruel, in my opinion. There's, and it's frustrating to me, and I'm going to digress a little bit, that people who self-identify as Christians would take health care away from their neighbors. I think that is probably one of the most disgusting things that can be done and has been done. This bill is worse than the Arkansas bill because it contains a trigger provision. Ultimately, with the fiscal note that we got back in the House, stated that if Governor Reynolds can secure the work requirements, 32,000 Iowans will lose their health insurance. But the trigger provision is that if the federal government doesn't basically approve those work requirements, then it's a trigger to eliminate the entire program, and 186,000 Iowans would lose their health insurance. So it's a terrible bill. They are gambling with the lives and the health of Iowa citizens, and it is absolutely disgraceful that this has gone. perhaps Senator Staed can allude. I don't know that this has passed the Senate, but I know Governor Reynolds is. It is on her desk. Okay. So yes, and she's moving forward with getting those work requirements done. Also, another bad bill, the SNAP requirement changes, which this is one of those things that's just more red tape. The Republicans will claim that they want people to buy healthy food to be able to cook healthy food at home. That's great in theory, but in practice, it is going to take money out of people's mouths for food. And in a time when we have record food insecurity, I do not see any value in doing that. And just to kind of talk a little bit on the healthy meals fund, one of the things, if this bill was law, I think of my nephew. He is probably the world's pickiest eater, and it's not that my sister hasn't tried. My sister is a vegan who knows how to cook good food and make vegan food tasty. He is just a picky eater. He eats 3 things like chicken nuggets, hot dogs, and chips, And so if you're qualifying those as not healthy, which we don't even know what they're going to quantify as because they refuse to share the lists with us, you basically, if those are the things that he's eating, he's not eating, or you've put that burden back onto people in that situation. It's just, it's the government micromanaging what food people can have. And it's the whole idea is designed to throw enough red tape out there so that people give up and get frustrated and don't rely on these programs. But people got to eat, and there's always going to be hungry people, and it's just going to further exacerbate hunger. Just kind of lastly, I'll touch on kind of the other things. I know diversity, equity, inclusion was top of the list as another bill that was ran through the legislature prohibiting. I find it ironic that, on the day that they were banning, colleges and board of regents from having diversity, equity, inclusion program, that they also passed a bill to establish a school of intellectual freedom at the University of Iowa. The Onion can't write better parody than what happens sometimes in the Iowa House and Republican leadership. It's just, I don't know. They claim they want merit-based education, which, 2 things. I think that half the time Republicans get mad, make up a problem, get mad about it, and then legislate on it. I think their outrage against diversity, equity, inclusion is paramount to that. Secondly, though, they'll claim they want merit-based hiring education. Well, to me, it's ironic that the people who are screaming the most for merit-based hiring practices are the world's biggest Nepo babies. So, just look at the cabinet. But those are kind of the main bills. There's certainly a lot of other bills, and I will I'll hand it over to my colleague here in the Senate to kind of talk about what the bills that he has that they've been working on over there, and kind of go from there.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everybody, for being here. The good news, there's good news. The good news is today is the last day of the legislative session. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, there you go.
Last day that we have incentive for being in the legislature. Per diems have ended, and so will the salary as of today. So there will be an end to this session. When that happens, we're not sure at all because the Republicans are having disputes within their party and their ranks with leadership and others, with minority groups in the Senate and the Senate against the House, and the governor in the Senate against the House. So we'll see how long it takes them to get it together, and we'll have a budget and we can conclude. Wanted to talk about some key legislative issues. We've had more than 1,000 bills passed already this year in the House and Senate. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about a little bit about each one of them. So I picked a few key ones that I wanted to, and I have little notes on them, so I'll give you a little bit of information. First of all, the hands-free driving, which was Senate File 22. You're probably aware of that. It restricts use of electronic devices while operating a vehicle. This is a good bill. It passed the House 84-11 and the Senate 47-1. Another good bill was the cell phones in schools. This bill sets a statewide floor for restrictions on student cell phone use during instructional time. It passed the Senate 49-0 and the House 92-4, and the governor signed it already. We have expanded parental leave for adoptive parents bill, House File 248. So this grants the same parental rights to adopt a child as those who give birth to a child in reference to parental leave. It passed the House 87-0 and the Senate 45-0. So there is some bipartisan work. The expanded cancer health care for firefighters. The bill expands the access to health care for firefighters afflicted with cancer, and it expands the number of cancers that can be insured. Another one, well, let's get to the bad, I guess. The inadequate school funding. Governor still hasn't signed this, but the House and Senate agreed on a 2% allowable growth. And it's not enough to meet the needs, not even the inflationary needs of the school district. Mike still? Okay. All right. Amy talked about the Medicaid restrictions and that trigger in there, which is a really obvious way of getting rid of the extended Medicaid bill. If any time that the federal government rejects the exemption or rejects the requirements for working, that it'll automatically require the Department of Human Services to end the Medicaid expanded program in Iowa. Another bad bill is the school chaplains, House File 884. This bad bill allows unvetted religious chaplains into Iowa schools, granting them access to students without so much as a background check. It's been referred to, among others, in the Senate and talked about it as a predator's paradise. So we're no vote on that. Things that are unfinished. We have two versions of property tax reform. Neither one of them looks like it's going to move in the House or the Senate, unless there's some kind of compromise. Maybe there'll be specific parts of it that pass, but those are in trouble. We think that the Republicans are going to wait a year until they work on property tax reform. Another issue is the budget. Both the House and the Senate have bills to spend about $9.4 billion. They're about $34 million apart. The House has money in their funding for community colleges at $8 million and for the Regents universities. The Senate has nothing for them. The House also wants to keep their promise on para-educator funding. The Senate does not have that in its projections. So we're going to have to see what happens in terms of the budget as well. And we got a couple of other bills, the eminent domain, which hasn't passed the Senate. It's passed the House several times, but the Senate sitting on it. Then we also heard, you probably read in the paper, the cancer bill with Bayer is coming back again. That'll be risen from the dead probably before we're finished. So that's about what I have on the key issues. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that you have on various bills. Yeah.
All right, if you have questions, we ask you in this room, we have to come to this microphone, so just come around, Bob, if you would. Because we don't have the ability to bring the mic to you in this room. So when we get back to the Fellowship Hall next fall, then we'll be able to do that again. So just come up to the microphone, and if there's more than one person, just stand in line and ask your question. And it can be either to both Representative Wichtendahl or Senator Staed, or just to one, whichever you prefer.
You can ask questions about the bills or the climate or anything else that's like.
I want to thank you both for being here, and I want to thank you both for enduring what must have been a really long and still is legislative session. So thank you for your work. My question has to do with recruiting doctors to come to the state. And I'm curious as to what your colleagues on either side of the aisle think that it is that impedes doctors from coming here. I have my own personal opinion, but I'm curious as to why this is an issue. You know, they say that we need to attract more doctors. Wonder why that is.
You ask a difficult question. It's a good guess as to why they believe it. Because, gee, don't they have enough information about reproductive rights, LGBTQ, transgender, salary, reimbursement rates from Medicaid, on and on and on. There are excuses, reasons for them not coming. I don't know I can't speak for them.
I think that there is, a lot of the policies that they enact in their race for trying to win the quote unquote culture war battles have a negative, devastating impact on the type of people that we can attract and recruit to Iowa. I do also think that, at the end of the day, sometimes the fact that the wages and salaries in Iowa are much lower compared to neighboring states, especially when you consider graduates from any of our universities. If you're graduating with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, are you going to stay in a state that pays you less? It's as simple as that. They want to have their cake and eat it too. Interestingly enough, as we're kind of jumping back to the diversity, equity, inclusion, they'll ban that and talk about merit-based things, but they also passed a bill, and I don't know if this has passed the Senate yet, but basically, I can't think it came back over from the Senate, where it was just like 80% of graduates for the medical program, or 80% of students in the medical program have to be recruited from Iowa. And part of that's in a reaction to some of the legislators' own kids not being able to succeed at passing the test to get into the University of Iowa. So they'll move those goalposts when it suits them. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to they prioritize, the culture war issues. They target attacking people's health care and starving people of funding. And then the result of all of their policies are people leaving Iowa, and they wonder why, but they don't have that self-awareness, or maybe they do, or just choose not to care. I'm not sure, but their policies are, in effect, why we struggle to recruit doctors. And teachers.
And the rejection of science and vaccines. The atmosphere here is not good for medical professionals.
Thank you, Senator Staed and Representative Wichtendahl, for being here today. It's a pleasure and honor to hear from you, and also to have you serving for us. My question is, we're fortunate to live in a community where our elected officials reflect our values. What can we do to address senators or representatives that don't directly represent us and we don't vote for them? Is there value in writing letters or making phone calls, or what do you suggest is the best use of our resources to help move some of these representatives who don't directly represent our district? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. What you're doing is great. It's important to write the letters. It's important to get the emails. It strengthens us, reinvigorates us as well. Also, it lets us know what the public is thinking about. So they're extremely important to continue to do that. And it's one of the ways that you can voice your concerns and bring issues. Be sure to send it to all the leadership, particularly the chairs of committees that are having a bill, and the leadership in the majority party. And what I like to do is when an individual sends one of those emails, if you carbon copy your legislator. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, definitely always reach out. I mean, because I do know one of the things, this has always been my philosophy. When a government doesn't fear change at the ballot box, it has slightly less incentive to want to listen to the public. And I think a lot of times that's what they want. They want you to get frustrated. They want you to give up. They want you to think that your voice doesn't matter. And even if they choose to ignore you, let them hear from you. Make them hear from you. You can call them, you can leave messages, you can send messages, and I think it's important that they hear from a diverse cross section of Iowans in addition to their own people, because a lot of times some of these decisions that are being made in the House and the Senate do impact the entirety of the state. Senator Staed had, I think, has a great recommendation. Yes, reach out to them and also, include your elected official as well in there too. So that way, and because I do know from a priority perspective, yes, we do tend to prioritize our own constituents and the voices and opinions of our own constituents. That being said, though, like I said, when there are bills before certain committees, if they are impacting you or impacting anything, absolutely reach out to every committee member. That's what I've always say on any of those bills. Because a lot of times if you can put firm opposition or voices to any particular bill while it's still in committee, you have the greatest chance of impacting how that bill goes. Now, it's not always the time, but the best time to stop a lot of these bills is whether or not they're in subcommittee or committee, because a lot of times if they do get a lot of pushback or a lot of amendments, they may not choose to run those on the floor. Sometimes, and one thing that I'll always tell people too is, like, if it comes to the floor, it has the votes to pass. Leadership is not going to put a bill on the floor that's going to fail. But yeah, I would say definitely be active. Never let people tell you that your voice doesn't matter. It does. And even if they choose to do something different, always make sure that you were heard, because they still have to come back to their districts and explain their votes to you, and ideally look you in the eye and justify why you voted. They voted the way they did.
I wanted to thank all of you that have sent postcards or notes of encouragement. That's really important too, because day after day, you're voicing your concerns about issues in front of you, and you need the encouragement. Sometimes a note or a postcard just made my day. So that's very appreciated.
Amy and Art, thank you for your service during this most difficult times. It's very much appreciated. Question, 2% for public schools. What about what's the increase for the voucher scholarship private schools?
That one's right off the top. There's no barrier to whatever it costs, as many as they can. It'll be around $325 million this next year. So no matter what the income of the individual, they get the voucher. There's no cap.
How's that compare with the first year? Or it's a lot more today.
$200 million more per year. And just think, but we're $34 million short on making an agreement. They could do all kinds of stuff by just putting a cap on it. Maybe at $2.5 million, they give you $1 million to spend on other $100 million.
Thank you.
Just to dovetail off of that too, from my understanding, yes, the voucher is increasing 44% in the overall budget from over last year, and yes, it's an unaccountable boondoggle that basically, just if I could quote my friend Adam Zabner in the House, I mean, basically Speaker Grassley said we need to rein in entitlement programs, but the Republicans created an entitlement program with a voucher system. And they're basically taking money from the few and redirecting it to money from all of us and redirecting it to the few. And like as Senator Staed alluded to, once the income cap's off, it's going to be redirected to the wealthy, and a lot of times redirected to the wealthy elite in Des Moines, where most of the private schools actually are. It's a terrible program, and we're early in this whole voucher program. Other states have done this far before Iowa, and it becomes just this vast black hole of government spending. In Ohio, where my sister lives, they're having to cut back on road use funds to keep this voucher program popped up. So yeah, it's unsustainable. And honestly, looking at the government budget a few years ahead, they're not going to be able to make the numbers work without either taking from all of these other programs or increasing fees or taxes in order to sustain this program. That decision is going to have to be made by them, because we will never support it. But like I said, they will just know that they will keep throwing more and more of your tax dollars at the voucher program.
Wow. I hate to take you off of the school, but I'd like to talk just a minute, ask you questions about Medicaid. It feels like this is just another strategy, a way to cut the budget by putting in this work requirement. Do they have data on how many people are currently working who are on Medicaid, so that they could see what percentage more they need?
I want to believe it's like 75% or more are doing some kind of work. The thing that they're doing is they're increasing the amount of hours that need to work. It was 80 hours under the House bill. I understand that it's gone up to 100 hours now, which is nearly full-time work in an entire month that they're doing it. The thing is, and yes, that's what they'll say. They'll say that, like, we want to get people off of Medicaid and working, but there is a vast gap, like, especially if you're still working part-time, because you have to work 30 hours in order to qualify for health insurance under any employer. Keep in mind, a lot of part-time work doesn't offer this. And so I think the goal is to kind of push people off and let the private sector figure it out, but you're really going to end up with a lot of people without insurance. As mentioned, like I said, up to 32,000 people come off insurance. Now, it's important to know that that doesn't result in savings to you, because people who don't have insurance still go to the ER, they still go to the doctor, and a lot of times those costs are reabsorbed by the taxpayer, who will cover those costs and services. Additionally, people who don't have insurance have worse work outcomes. They may be sicker for longer, may not be able to work, which takes tax dollars out of the budget, which again, it doesn't really, ultimately, when Arkansas did it, it didn't do any kind of tax savings. It's just a talking point to push people off government assistance, and that's basically the end of it. And it's like, if I could be perfectly blunt, from their perspective, it's like a sucks to be you kind of thing. Like, well, good luck. We're the government. We shoved you off and you'll figure it out. And, like I said, for a lot of people who have either like chronic illnesses or different medical conditions, which makes it hard to maintain a full 30 to 40 hour week work, they are just going to fall in between the cracks, not have health insurance, and have worse health outcomes and worse opportunities to maintain a stable life.
So if I heard what you said 75% or 85% of people already work.
It's a high number, yeah. Like
And
a lot of
was their goal to be 100%? Oh no, it's to get people off of Medicaid.
The goal is to get people off of Medicaid.
So are they trying to get rid of the Medicaid program?
Based on what's going on the federal level, that's, I think, is the goal. I mean, they're talking on the federal level, the Trump forthcoming tax cuts, they want to cut $800 billion from Medicaid, which, if memory serves, is almost the entire allotted budget for the entire program. So that's their goal, to basically, excuse me, basically eradicate government programs and let people figure it out. To me, one of the things that, and I've had this argument with conservatives. I'm like, the best argument for raising the minimum wage is a conservative one, because if you can have people earn a living wage, then they don't need things like government assistance, and they may have health insurance. Personally, I'm all for having a universal health insurance, because I think the system we have now just is overly complicated and pushes people off. But yeah, no, I mean, their goal is to just let people figure it out. And with the for-profit healthcare system that we have, that's overly expensive, and when they take away regulations and cut quality of care, people are left figuring it out getting worse healthcare outcomes, or denying healthcare altogether. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
She's absolutely right. The trigger in that bill will end Medicaid if the work requirements are not met. And that's in the future. In the next 2 years, that would be the case.
Medicaid expansion, not Medicaid.
Medicaid expansion, the Iowa program, would end it altogether for 188,000 Iowans. That's what the intention was by putting that trigger in that bill.
Hi, I'm exhausted from the Iowa legislature and staying up late, sending those emails, copying and pasting individual ones. So I'm exhausted. I cannot imagine how you guys do it day after day. So I am the mother of a trans daughter who also has a trans woman roommate who's on Medicaid. And I thought when the Iowa legislature yanked the civil rights for trans people out of the civil rights code, I thought they've got something up their sleeve. And this past week, there it came like a zombie rising from the grave. They want to yank care for transgender people out of Medicaid. My daughter's roommate is on Medicaid. She has issues, I'll just say, so it would make it difficult for her to work at all. So the idea of pulling her care out of that, not even having counseling, what are the chances that this bill is going to come back? They tried it on Tuesday and Wednesday. It didn't quite work. Do you think they're going to bring it up again next week?
I hate to say this, but yes, I do think they will. I think it's part of the HHS budget. Only in the Senate. It's in the budget. It's in the Senate budget in order to restrict that. There'd be no state funding or of any kind for transgender. So it's something we'll have to fight. We continue to fight. It's one of these horrible things in the legislature right now. Without the numbers, you always lose. So we continue to bring the fight to them. We argue what's right, and we depend upon your support. We'll continue to do that. We're not going to stop. But every day you're outnumbered. It's 2-1 in the subcommittees. It's an overwhelming number in the committees, and it's same thing on the floor. So the right has to prevail in the long run. We're going to keep fighting.
Yeah, no, it's they say if it comes over from the Senate, there's a good chance it'll pass through the House because, and unfortunately, Senator Staed is correct with the numbers being what they are. I mean, this was their stated goal when they removed gender identity from the Iowa Civil Rights Act. And the arguments that they would make is like, well, why should taxpayers have to pay for gender affirming care? I mean, you can take that same argument to a lot of different things. For example, I'm not a smoker. Why should I have to pay for people to cover for cancer care for people who smoked all their lives? Or I'm not an athlete, so why should I have to pay for someone who trashed out their knees in high school for a knee replacement? If you keep playing this game long enough, you get to the point where you have basically the whole concept of pre-existing conditions, where the whole idea is to deny health care for everybody. Like I said, I firmly believe that we need to work towards universal healthcare because healthcare is a human right, that we shouldn't have to question people's healthcare outcomes. Additionally, more nefariously, excuse me, having gone up to the Capitol even before being elected, and seeing the different things that the targets they've put on gender affirming care, I think they know that gender affirming care is life-saving for people, and that's the point. They don't want us to exist. They will do whatever they can to make us not exist. Either if it takes away our health care or takes away our rights under law, that's what they'll do because they don't want us to exist. And I feel 100% for your daughter, her roommate, for everyone in the trans community, my friends, my family, because we're freaking sick of them using us to mask their failures of government. The fact that they can't do anything to improve the lives of Iowans, that they constantly go back to this well of targeting a very small percentage of the population. We're only about 7,000 people in the entire state of Iowa, which is less than the population of the city of Hiawatha, where I reside. But we are the outsized focus of what this government chooses to focus on. And quite frankly, and quite bluntly, if they spend as much time as they do targeting the trans community as working to improve the outcomes for everyday Iowans, eggs would be free right now. So.
I'm Alice Dalla. I spent my career as a speech language pathologist at Grantwood AEA, and I've been watching with horror as they dismantle the Department of Education in Washington, along with USAID. That was a stunner for me as a human rights activist. Anyway, I'm watching now what's going on in the Iowa legislature and wondering, is anybody going to pick up what is going away at the national level for students with disabilities? I'm alarmed by what I'm hearing in the media here. For one thing, I was reading in the paper this morning about lack of funding for para-educators in the schools, but on the media, on the TV, they're talking about lack of funding for parent educators, and that's a whole different thing. Does the legislature know that that's a different thing? Are they even sorting out what goes on at the AEAs as opposed to what goes on in the schools? How much do they know about what education is actually doing and what's needed before they decide on defunding everything?
Granted, I've been there for a year. My experience on some of these issues is to just put the cart before the horse and just try to figure it out later. I think the AEAs was a great example of that. They were so desperate to get it done that they didn't realize that they accidentally cut funding to 90% of the AEAs for next year when they said that was the thing that they weren't going to do. So no, I don't think that they really think these things through. I know with you mentioned the funding of the Department of Education. I think the goal from there is they always say this, they're like, we'll just send it as block grants and send it back to the states. Well, the downside is once they do that, the states, especially if you don't include provisions, and they won't, they'll just basically hand the states a bunch of money. And then the states can do whatever. But like if you're our state, which is hemorrhaging dollars due to the fiscal mismanagement of Governor Reynolds and others, then they'll use that to plug the hole and not necessarily go towards our schools. A lot of these programs that will be cut as a result of the Department of Education being gutted probably won't be made up by either the school districts or the state legislature. Certainly there will be, I would imagine, if this comes to pass, there will be outcry once they start seeing what is exactly being cut, and there'll be something that, again, they put the cart before the horse. They will try to figure it out. They'll say they'll figure it out later, or they'll say they'll do it later. But when it comes down to real dollars that are coming back from the federal government, they will always choose the benefit of their wealthy donors. And again, they'll probably use it to fund the voucher program just based on experience. Like I said, I can't predict the future, but that's my guess as to what they would do with it.
At this point, I don't think we've seen any movement by the state in order to fill some of those gaps. They haven't addressed those issues in a lot of ways, not just education, but in the environment and all the other issues that we see coming down. So one of the things we need to do is we need a new governor to start with, to lead the state.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your service, especially in this mind-blowingly bad session. But I am asking you to predict the future. Tell us about the governor's race. What do you think is going to happen? Easy question.
Well, the front runner is Rob Sands. That's all I've got to say. And I think because we see the crowds, like the crowd here and the support that we have across the state, things are looking better, things are looking up, and we have to do this.
I don't know that I have too much to add except to say that, yes, more than anything, it is incumbent upon us to elect a new governor, a Democratic governor in 2026. And we need to obviously elect more people to the legislature. I know flipping the majorities in both the House and the Senate may take more than one cycle. But the key is if we do have a new Democratic governor, and Rob Sand is that governor, then he can veto Republican legislation. And with enough people in the House and the Senate, we can sustain that veto. So it is a light at the end of the tunnel and a turn towards common sense. I will just, as a caveat, some people have asked me to run for governor. I'm not running for governor. I won't say no to lieutenant governor, though.
I have a question about what is the governor trying to hide from Rob Sand? She's refusing to turn over emails. And do you think she's eventually going to have to?
I mean, okay, I don't know definitively what she's hiding, but generally speaking, if you're hiding money from the auditor, you have something to hide, and where is that money going? We don't truly know, and because of the actions, we might not know for years to come. It is suspicious. What happened, this year, the governor signed an executive order to establish a Doge task force. I'm like, you don't need a Doge task force. We can uncover waste, fraud, and abuse by doing one simple trick, and that is to let the auditor do his job. Yeah. Hello.
Oh, does Art have a question?
I did-
You're not, Art's not going to follow up on that.
Did you want to follow up on that one, Art?
Well, I think since the COVID days, the money, federal government money that's sent to the state, that a lot of that does not earmarked. We don't know where she spent it. We haven't seen those oversight from the Senate. So she probably has a lot that's hidden, and then we're never going to get to see it.
So my question, I'm Nancy, and thank you for your service. And Amy, welcome to the State House. It was a lovely welcome for you. We are at this church, we're doing one-on-ones and for community organizing, and we have a training tomorrow in this space, as a matter of fact. And one of the things that I keep hearing about in organizing is what is your narrative and what is the clear story? And one of the things that I get frustrated about is I hear a lot of things here, but because of, I think in some ways, fear in, schools, in the newspapers, in the media, and also the corporate control of all the media outlets with the same voice. There's this fear that you have to keep it, quote unquote, balanced. And so you have to have this one side and another side, when in fact there's a lot of diverse sides. But I think one of the things that we're not doing is for everyone who says, oh, Doge is terrible, then you have Ashley Hinton say it's the best thing in the world and it's exactly what needs to happen. It's the best thing. And that's a simple, easy statement. People hear it and they're like, oh, okay, we're okay then. And especially for people, this is politically involved people in here. I mean, it's like for people who aren't involved and are overwhelmed and are freaking out, if someone says it'll be okay, they're going to listen to that. So my question is before we move into all these sessions and when we're organizing, what can we tell people? I mean, sometimes it's facts, sometimes it's other things, but what is our narrative of improvement of how we can move forward? And it can't just be, if we're in control, we'll be better. It won't be that. It has to be, what are those things we can do and why it's bad now? I think some people just don't even realize how it's impacting them because they haven't seen it yet. So what are those three things and how it impacts them?
So there's a little bit to unpack there. I would say just kind of a first thing. Yes, I share that frustration with the media, the both sides of it, especially in the aftermath of them removing gender identity from the Civil Rights Act. Because at least from the media, it was kind of like, Governor Reynolds removed gender identity from the Iowa Civil Rights Act. Here's Tom with the weather. I don't feel that it got the magnitude that it really should have, that you just took civil rights from Iowans. And now you're seeing on the federal level, you're seeing the government deport US citizens. There are times when no, we cannot, the media needs to not both sides things. And I think we as elected officials, particularly Democrats, I think we have a tendency to get way too into the weeds and not be able to be like, boil it down to a simple level. You mentioned also just kind of, yes, I agree. We can't just assume that once we're all elected that we'll be back in charge. We do have to put forward a clear and coherent vision, because the simple fundamental truth is that American democracy is not working for Americans. The problems have been corrupted to the point where we have dark money controlling everything, where we need to go ahead and do very real systemic change on how we elect our leaders. We have to be clear on that, because if we don't, we just get back in this cycle where after Democrats come back in, the Republicans will just come back in with more money. We need to first and foremost target dark money. We need to make sure that our elections are open and transparent and eliminate outside spending funds, things like that, outside groups and how they're spending elections. I know Senator Staed will probably disagree with me, but personally, I'm all in for term limits. I think that we Like, if we really want to have true change in America, we have to get rid of the Electoral College, because you can't have a true multi-party system unless you get rid of the Electoral College. And I think we should be clear on that, because it is time to change the fundamentals to make sure that American democracy is working for Americans. And unless we're willing to start putting forward these changes and have them discussed openly and honestly, we're just going to keep falling back into this cycle. So that's my thought.
Just wanted to say something about the media. There are so many different sources out there that all of us, especially when you hear news of consequence, that you go to good sources and find many different sources before making a personal decision on the facts. I also at this point wanted to talk about the difference between media and journalism. And I think media has not reacted, has not really gone into depth about what's happening. And where your journalists do a better job of that, it takes a little bit more work, a little bit more reading, but I think that's extremely important. And I also want to give a shout out to the Cedar Rapids Gazette, because they've done an excellent job this year covering what's happened at the legislature. Those are my comments.
Any other last questions? Kristen, do we have any online? Okay. Any other last questions? All right, I'm going to ask you a question then, to each of you. There's a lot going on and a lot of negative stuff that are impacting people. What brings you hope still, even in these times?
You all do. Seeing people coming out and hearing all the emails. You can talk to my wife, Susan. We've had thousands of emails in support of things, of the good things, and we really appreciate it. It's important. So your voice is what's making the difference and will eventually make a difference. I'm inspired by the community coming out for the rallies, particularly where there were 2,500 people down on the street outside the federal building. I mean, that was just amazing that people are finally getting the message and are speaking out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna ditto quite a lot of that. It's people do always and continue to give me hope. How many people, like the fact that we led the largest protest in Iowa history that week, but also just going around and like, what was it? Just randomly getting coffee one day and have the woman at the drive-thru window. She's like, "Oh my God, I love you. I follow you on TikTok." So it is things like that, but also like I try to tell people and try to remind people that this isn't the end. Things are bad, yes, but we still have within us the capacity to build a better future. That is within all of us because it has happened. History a lot of times is cyclical. Last week I spoke at the Lavender graduation for Mount Mercy, and when I was a student at Mount Mercy, oh my God, did things feel like the end of the world back then too? Like 2004 election, George Bush was reelected in part on, banning same-sex marriage in 27 states. That was a gut punch. And especially, you saw the kind of creeping authoritarianism in the Bush administration through with the Patriot Act and harassing of students. And then 4 years later, we rejected that with the election of Barack Obama. And then we saw like Iowa legalized same-sex marriage in 2009, add gender identity and sexual orientation to the Civil Rights Act. We saw that in 2015 with the Supreme Court. So I do believe that, yes, better days are ahead and that if we stand together, we can make them happen. So that's because the alternative is just to give in to pessimism, and I refuse to do that. It's just, I will always believe that a better future is possible if we stand together and work for it.
Hi, my name's Nancy Perk, and I'm not from Cedar Rapids. I'm from Tama County. And I just want to thank you both. I read the stuff that you put out. I think I've been blocked from my representative since 2014 when we were fighting to keep the juvenile home open. And I often have to just track him down at any event that he might be having. The most recent one, which I find is kind of alarming for our small community, is that he's on the board of renovating a church, the Catholic Church, into a private school. And I have a real problem with the amount of money that will be taken out of our small community by this man that clearly doesn't represent a lot of his constituents, because there's a lot of us that's been blocked. The school has 8 rooms. To my understanding, they don't have to be certified teachers, that they just need a certificate to teach. I worry about the oversight. I worked at the juvenile home for 29.5 years, and I worry about that it's a breeding ground for bad things that could happen to children in an unsupervised area. But anyway, I read everything that you guys are putting out there, and I appreciate the information that you provide for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
There is one question online, and if you don't know the answer, I can give it. On the chaplain bill, how did that come forward, and who brought that to the legislature?
Sure. I know that's been, well, I believe the bill manager, at least in the House, was it Helena Hayes, I want to say?
Yeah, she was but Barb Kniff McCullough is actually the one that.
Barb Kniff McCullough. I
Yeah.
might have been thinking of the baby Olivia bill
Yeah.
with the other one. I know it's been a bill that's been cycling through the legislature for several cycles. And maybe it may be a fair question for the representatives who supported this bill. I very much voted against it, but just ask them, and especially some of these schools, I'm like, so you're okay with the Church of Satan having a chaplain at school, right? Because you can't put any restrictions on it, First Amendment and all, and I would ask them that, but it's a bad bill. But yeah, I'm sorry. I believe Nick McCullough. Was there any other questions on it, I suppose?
No, that was,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Any other questions in the room? Well, thank you so much, Senator Art Staed and Representative Aime Wichtendahl. We're grateful for each of you and for your service. As I said earlier at the start of the program, we will take a break for the summer for intersections, start back up in September. And we hopefully, Jonathan, will be in the bottom area in the newly redone, refurbished Fellowship Hall. So we will see you in the fall. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.